to continue. We were just talking about how we should start on time more often. That's why we were late. Because Kevin ran into some
late. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you guys were on time. I know. Kids, believe me, it's all my fault. I've learned that sentence. But yeah, it is all my fault, for sure. But Kevin ran into some Leaf fans who watched the show, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, no, it was fun. It was in Detroit, so I appreciated if they're watching today, I appreciated the chat, and it was fun. It's happened to me a few times that I've been about and met some podcast fans. So.
Well, Kevin, they needed those extra ginger ales because of the way their team played on Friday.
Yeah. I got to confess. Having watched them live now, and I've actually watched all of their games, or at least pieces of their other games. I think our assessment of them is pretty right on the money. I mean, they're going to have trouble scoring goals. I think Babcock can draw more out of them. I think their compete level will be higher. But I sure have the sense that Mike does not love his goalies. That's the impression I have. And
pretty safe bet right now.
Yeah, and historically, Mike doesn't have much patience with goaltending. So, so it'll be interesting. But I still think it's funny. But the guys that I talk to, and I just wrote this too. What I find the most impressive about their rebuild is the fans are just totally on board with it. Like that's the bonus of having a fan base that understands the sport. I mean, not just a little bit, but like they like understand that they have to get worse in order to get better. And they were fine about the loss, because they get this. This is what it's going to be like this season. So, and they were split on whether I'm right or Mike's right about how long this is going to take. A couple of the guys thought it's going to be a lengthy process, and a couple of the guys thought, as I do, that starting next season they'll be a much better team.
Well, I mean, all I can say is that I was in Toronto on Saturday and watching the game from a sports bar when they were playing the Ottawa Senators, and the pro-Toronto crowd was visibly rooting for Ottawa. So I think that the fan base is on board with, and not just, I'm not saying the tank. I'm saying doing what this team needs to do to be successful, which is get lottery picks, high quality prospects at the top of next year's draft, maybe the draft after that, and then build around those young players. They see it in other organizations, so I think that they want what Pittsburgh has had. They want what, even though Edmonton hasn't been successful with it, they want what Edmonton has with all those number 1 or number 2 picks. They think that's the way to success, and I think the fan base and I think the organization is on the same page.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And the difference is, like, I like their collection of younger players. I mean, I think they're off to a nice start. When you factor in Nylander, Kapanen, Marner, even Connor Brown, and Morgan Riley's young, and those other guys, as we talked about before, Van Riemsdyk and Kadri, they're still young enough to be a factor, or they can be turned into things. And the Kadri thing, now I'm more inclined, having watched him shift by shift, I'm more inclined to believe they're going to move him.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was going to bring that up, Kevin. It's like his ice time has gone down the last 3. He's leading the team in plus minus. He's leading the team in shots on goal, but he's leading the team in plus minus, and his time on ice has gone down each game to the point that, and he was losing so many faceoffs in the game against Ottawa that they had to bring in Nick Spaulding and Tyler Bozak to take faceoffs in the defensive zone because he was losing so many. And there's a photo on Twitter that is worth 1,000 words of Babcock basically in the ear of Kadri. And I'm like, I'm telling you right now, that is going to be a rough patch for that kid if he doesn't straighten up and fly right, because Babcock will not take his stuff. He wants him to work. He wants him to play at both ends of the ice. And if he doesn't do it, he is gone.
Yeah, I think he's got 7 more games, and I think Babcock will be fed up with him if he doesn't do it. So I think Babcock has turned it all up on him, and now it's a matter of sink or swim for the kid. I mean, that's really what it's going to boil down to now.
Hello, Hockey World. It's Monday, October 12th, 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen from USA Today, and talk about changing on the fly there.
Well, people say we're starting late, so I'm Eklund, and you're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. You're watching the Hockey Buzzcast, which is a show that comes to you on the internet. That can be found on your computer at home. And if you're, I don't know how you'd be watching this and not understand that. But anyway, we'll deal with it from here. This is we come to you weekly or daily, actually, every week, Monday through Friday. Yeah, Monday through Friday. And 1 o'clock to give you your hockey news. Sorry, I got thrown a little bit there. I was trying to understand the Mike Richards settlement. So let's start here today, and then we're going to get into some other things too, and then we'll continue Leafs talk, because it's the law. But we'll get back to that soon. Mike, can you explain the Mike Richards settlement?
Yeah, sure.
In 10,000 words or less, go.
It's till 2031.
That's just. I wouldn't be alive in 2031. Go ahead, continue.
I haven't heard the specifics in terms of the amounts, but from what I understand, the amount for the next 5 years is fairly close to what the cap recapture penalty was when they terminated the contract, and then the settlement was basically an extension of the amount of the contract. It was, from what I hear, it's $550,000, which is the minimum amount of an NHL contract, I believe, or close to. I think it's $550 or $570.
Okay.
But it's extended from the end of the cap recapture, 5 years, till
otherwise known as cap recap, which is also a drink at Starbucks, I think. Continue. Mm-hmm.
Yes, till 2031. So it's gonna be a cap hit for 16 years. Now, they haven't released the specific dollar amount, but. And I'm going to yield to Kevin on this. I've heard through other media sources that a lot of people in the NHL are not too happy about this scenario. And the one thing I found interesting was that the NHL came out and said that this does not set a precedent for other teams. So this is sort of like the Supreme Court Bush versus Gore decision. They decided to give the election to President Bush, but the decision did not have any kind of precedent going forward.
How?
So
that's not how precedents work.
No,
you can't say something doesn't have precedence, Kevin.
Well, I mean, they're basically saying this is such a unique situation, and they say they have followed the CBA. Now, again, I haven't delved that much into it, but Mike's right on. I mean, I've heard people say that they just didn't like how this came down, to be sure. So, I think it was one of those situations where you can't predict what you're going to see with the CBA, and so they took what the rules they had there and tried to make the best of them. And I don't think the Kings felt they had an incredibly strong case. I mean, it sure looked opportunistic that they just decided at a time when they needed to get rid of him to cancel his contract. So as happens oftentimes in American litigation, you settle. And this was a compromise where I'm sure the Kings weren't happy about it, but isn't that supposed to be the definition of a good compromise, when neither side gets whatever they want? But 16 years, so that's. I'm
going to be 61 years old, and I'm thinking about things that are going to happen. Like, my daughter's going to get married before Mike Richards isn't getting paid by the LA Kings. Things like she's 14. I would hope so. I mean, who knows? But it's just like, it's 16 years. It's just, that's 4 Olympics. I just want to throw that out there.
It's like the Bobby Bonilla deal. That's what everybody's saying, although it's for different circumstances. But here's the thing. This is the hard part for us to sort of figure out. So when are we allowed to get mad at Mike Richards for being a jerk? And because he was a jerk for a good portion of his Flyers career. However, he may be hooked on drugs, and so how are we supposed to forget about that and feel bad for him because of that? And is it the league's fault? Is it the person's fault? Because ultimately you're responsible for yourself. It's complicated in that regard because was his jerkiness because he was an addict? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what his situation is now, but that's what makes this really complicated.
Well, the thing is, the fault is in a way inconsequential to the end result, because the end result here, and I think that's where a lot of teams have the problem. I mean, I'm sure a lot of teams would like to get out of these disastrous, 8-9 year contracts that they've signed some players to by terminating the contract or having some sort of settlement. From an outside perspective, it sounds like a circumvention of the CBA, but according to the NHL, it's not. All I know is that the Kings, instead of taking, if it was a traditional buyout, would have taken a cap hit around less than $2 million, but for 10 years, because he had 5 years remaining on the deal. Now they've spread out that amount over an extra 6 years, and I mean, really, if it's $550,000 the last 11 years of the settlement, who cares? It's nothing. It's like carrying a 24th player, a borderline NHLer on your roster. They get away pretty much scot-free of any cap ramifications for Richard's contract.
Yeah, well, but here's my take on it, and I'm not saying, right or wrong whether this should have been allowed or not, but I think the reason why they allowed this is that the Kings could make a case that the contract should be voided. That he obviously violated the terms of the contract by getting arrested at the border. Now, historically, contracts don't get voided for these types of things, as we all know, especially if you like the player and you need the player. But in this case, they didn't. So yeah. I'm sure from the league's perspective and from if you were sending this to an arbitrator, he's saying, okay, you got to give the Kings a little bit because they might have a case here. And yet, on the other hand, this seems opportunistic. They were trying to get rid of the player, and suddenly he got in trouble with the law, so they saw this opportunity. So, that's why you ended up with this sort of compromise that, other teams around the league, as Mike accurately reported, don't like, because it does have the appearance of a end run on the salary cap. So, it's going to be interesting. Here's the bothersome thing to me, though. And this is the only. I mean, you got to feel a little bit of sympathy for players who get in this bind, because what is everybody now talking about after once we get past these numbers is who's Richard's going to sign with. I've had 4 or 5 conversations with people in the NHL about this, and nobody has said, well, I hope Mike gets treatment, or if he has a problem, or I hope he gets this sorted out, or I hope that he gets into the program. The first thing out of everyone's mouth is, who do you think he'll end up with?
We see, and that's my problem too, is, so has he been through the program? Is he clean? If he's not clean, how could he go out and sign a deal with a team? It was only a few months ago that he was caught at the border. So how do we even know he's clean? I mean, it's a great point, and that's what I was also thinking about too, is maybe he shouldn't be allowed to sign right away with a team until he passes a certain amount of tests. Why does he get thrown right back into the system? We don't know about it because that stuff's kept confidential. So, there's no way of.
Yeah, we don't know that he.
Well, which it should be. It should be kept confidential.
It should be kept confidential, but we don't know that that isn't the case right now. That he might not be able to sign right now, right? I mean, we don't know that. That is possible.
But that doesn't change my point. My point is
people are talking about it.
Yeah, the people are just talking about from a competitive standpoint and not saying, hey, Mike Richards clearly has issues here.
Well, let me go a little beyond that and say this, Kevin. That in a way is disturbing on many levels, because part of that tells me that people aren't surprised by this enough to say anything about it. In terms of maybe they're I know the report came out about more NHL players doing cocaine and all that. And I mean, let's face it, people of this economic level do cocaine probably at the same rate that NHL players at this economic level do cocaine. Mm-hmm. I don't think this is an NHL problem. I think it's a money issue, and I also think I do think there is definitely we talked about before about the fame and the whole idea of I think when we talked about this in the pre-show, I think that these NHL players that get out in front of the crowd, there's a huge surge of adrenaline and a huge thing about that, and that I've seen it with musicians too, that it just that goes away and is only there part of the time, and some of them turn to drugs to sort of fill the void of that at other times. Mm-hmm. But it kind of makes me think that a lot of people in the NHL are like, oh yeah, well, he's got a drug problem. Well, maybe maybe people just aren't surprised by the drug problem, and the drug problem has become such a small issue because there are enough people out there that have it.
Well,
Is
I mean,
that possible, or?
unfortunately, it wasn't a surprise for that particular team because obviously we had.
Well, that's yeah, and there's some of that's rumors too, and I don't know.
No. I wasn't gonna delve into the rumors of what we don't know about. I'm just talking about what we do know about Voinov, about Jared Stoll. But Jared Stoll's situation legally was straightened, not was adjudicated, and
Right.
he was cleared to sign with the Rangers. So I mean, the thing is, until Richard's case in Canada is cleared up, maybe he isn't free to sign with an NHL team, or an NHL team wouldn't even approach that until that's resolved. But the thing also is, he's had, and we've talked about this over the last few months, he's had injury problems throughout the last few years. Maybe it would be beneficial for him to take the rest of the year off, get in shape, clear his head and see if he wants to continue his career, and then maybe he comes in as a free agent next year and goes that route. Because I mean, I don't know if he's going to find a job right now based on his current situation.
No.
All right, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If you're caught with a substance in the NHL, you're suspended for 20 games.
Right.
At this point, now that's when they test you. But at this point, if you're caught at the border with all of what he was caught with, shouldn't he be out for at least 20 games no matter what?
It's interesting, but I mean, it probably was no. I don't know if there was. We don't know if there was a blood test taken or whatever to see if he was on things or if he was just moving things.
Well, he's not collecting them. He wasn't collecting them.
No, of course not. But you have. I think in order to get the 20-game suspension, you have to fail a blood test. That's. So to me.
And
I don't know.
And Russ, what they might do is they may suspend him sort of retroactively, have him give him a 20-game suspension, then whoever he signs with, he has to serve that first. But the thing is, they didn't suspend Jared Stoll, so I think they've already set the precedent that he was caught with something. He pled it down to a misdemeanor, I believe, and he didn't serve a suspension. So the NHL has already set a bit of a precedent that. We could go back to Don Murdoch back in the 70s. What was he suspended? 40 games for coke?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, if they want to go back to that, they can, but they've already...
no blood test. I don't know. I think this is all due... Kevin, what is it about... I just interrupted you, Kevin. I'm sorry. But what is it that bothers you about the way people are reacting to this? I wanted to...
Well, I mean, I just think that there should be... we should be spending more time talking about the root of the problem, which is... Obviously, Mike Richards has an issue, and I think that's what Dean Lombardi was talking about.
And that was pretty dramatic. Dean Lombardi's words.
And it was, and I mean, the part that really hit home for me was, like Dean Lombardi has been criticized heavily for not buying him out, and the reason he didn't buy him out, he to him,
right,
and he believed in him, and he felt like, and what he made clear is that Richards said he was okay. And he went and visited him in the off season, and what a surprise! Someone who allegedly is involved in drugs lies.
Right? No, I know, and it's an unfortunate. I mean, so Lombardi's words, without a doubt, and this has come from USA Today. The realization of what happened to Mike Richards is the most traumatic episode of my career, Lombardi said in a written. This is a written summation, but I'm getting it from USA Today. At times, I think that I will never recover from it. It is difficult to trust anyone right now, and you begin to question whether you can trust your own judgment. The only thing I can think of is that what could be worse would be suspecting your wife of cheating on you for 5 years and then finding out, in fact, it was true. This is pretty intense stuff for a general manager. I mean, very personal from a. I mean, I've always, people I think who know Lombardi knows he is. This is kind of, he is very heartfelt about what he.
Yeah, highly principled.
But he never puts this forward to the public. This side of him.
I do have an answer on the Jared Stoll. Lighthouse Hockey said in last June that the joint drug testing program doesn't test for recreational drugs like cocaine or marijuana, and I imagine Jared Stoll fell under that.
They call cocaine recreational?
That's what they're calling it.
Well, it's not. The difference is they're testing for performance-enhancing drugs.
Right. Okay. I see what you're saying now.
Yeah. So, for example, there was Darren McCarty. I did Darren McCarty's book, and in his book, he talked about the fact that he did test positive for marijuana when he was, getting drug tested, but that wasn't performance-enhancing. So that didn't cause him any problems. That just caused the team to say, look, you got to get kind of turned around. So.
Well, then the last thing that Lombardi said, which is also was interesting, got a lot of play around here. I heard the rumors that he might have some off-ice issues, but I refuse to believe that they were true, despite some obvious signs. Anyone close enough to me knows how much I loved Mike Richards. I believe that when I had acquired him, I had found my own Derek Jeter. But the fact is that he was never close to the player that he was after his best seasons in 08, 09, and 09, 010 in Philadelphia. His production dropped 50%. And the certain if factor he had was was vaporizing right in front of me daily. This is the player who in 2010 was instrumental to Canada's gold medal run, and by 2014, while still in his prime, was not even in the conversation for making the team. So, yeah, I mean, this almost not. I mean, around here, people have been talking about that the Flyers sold him damaged goods. That's what I've been hearing around here. I think this is a little bit rough because I thought Mike Richards was pretty darn good in his first year in LA.
He was.
He was good when they won the cup.
Right, and he was very important to that cup-winning team, the first cup around. He.
Yeah, but don't you have to admit though that he seemed on the decline? I mean, he played well, but his numbers were down.
Yeah, no, I mean his numbers were down, but then again he was with a different kind of role in LA than he'd been in.
That's fair.
So it was hard to say. So there's still more to be played out. I do agree that I think it's hard for the NHL to say this isn't a precedent-setting thing. I think that's difficult. I don't see how this can't be. And what this sets up to me is a topic for the next CBA. It feels as if there's going to have to be something in the next CBA to define ways of getting out of contracts under certain circumstances.
Or just better testing. I mean, they said only a third of the testing includes recreational. Why doesn't it all include it? Why is that okay? Why do we only care about performance enhancing? Right. They obviously should care about more.
Right. But to your point, Eck, I mean, part of what is going to happen in this new CBA is the fact that maybe by the time this current one is over with, you're going to have a significant number of teams that are right up against it with a lot of contracts, with a lot of long-term contracts. With little wiggle room. There's going to be more veteran players on PTOs, more young guys coming in on their entry-level deals because teams can't afford to spend extra money on those middle-of-the-road players. I mean, there's going to have to be a means of escape for some of these teams to jettison some contracts that they signed in free agency or sign their own players to extensions. I mean, I just think that there's going to have to be some avenue of escape.
By the way, Hextall didn't go too kindly to Lombardi's words, which was kind of surprising. He came back and said, "I know this. I know Mike Richards is a good kid." Hextall said Saturday before the Flyers' 7-1 road loss, which we'll discuss later. "I know Mike Richards was a very good hockey player, and I know he cared. All the other stuff I don't know enough about to comment." That's more like what you'd expect from a GM. And Hextall is, he's just going to the positives of Mike Richards. Yeah, he cared and he played hard and he did all that stuff, right? So he's not. It's surprising, and I couldn't help but think that some of this is Lombardi protecting the fact he didn't buy him out, and that really, that's how it comes across at least, that he has to go so harsh.
It's called damage control, Eck.
Yeah, I know, but I think that some of that is, I don't know, and I know, and Peter Luco also weighed in on the demise of Mike Richards too, as they're calling it, which is a little bit, I don't know. Again, this is a person with trouble. And you're right, Russ. I mean, there's another story here, and the story between the media and Mike Richards is a different thing altogether, for sure. I mean, the media, we had our issues with Mike Richards.
Yeah, but we have to push that aside. Look.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I mean,
that may have been him just not liking criticism anymore, and that's fine.
And actually, like I had said before, Mike Richards, to me at least, had gotten much better after he left Philadelphia. Jeff Carter didn't change at all. But he doesn't have problems like
he doesn't have trouble, right?
But at the same time, Mike Richards, what I will never forget is the press conference, and this is the last thing we'll go and move on from Richards from here. The press conference right after, I know you were there for this, Russ, too. It was in the upstairs room at Voorhees, right? And where the Flyers are coming back to welcome and greet people after they had gone to the Stanley Cup Finals. This is the camp right after that with Chicago. And the only Flyer that was in town was Richards. And they sent him up to the room to talk to us in the media. and he was really obnoxious. I
Yep.
mean, he was off. He was over the top. Like you know, you asked him questions, and he said, "I don't know." You know.
Yeah.
I said, "Is it good to see the players again?" Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's always good to see players. Is it, you know, what'd you do this summer? I did stuff. You know, we all did stuff this summer. That was literally the press conference of the only flyer with like 20 media people around him.
Yep.
And it was that was the one moment but like I said, Richards did get a little better after that. We'll see. But let's move on to hockey. And let's start with that Toronto-Detroit game, Mike and Kevin, because we talked a little bit about it before, and I know we can talk. I mean, did we talk enough about it? I don't know. Maybe we did, but
Well, I mean, I think we should talk about the teams that have gotten off to really slow starts. One of them including Toronto. I mean, I think.
Yeah, let's go there. That's a good idea. We'll start with the slow start teams.
I mean,
to lift the mood.
Yeah, I mean,
to be uplifting. Yeah.
To be uplifting. Yeah, Kevin, go ahead.
well, I mean, I was just going to say, we don't have a very large sample size, but we have basically. I think where we should go is talk about teams that are playing differently than we anticipated. And,
I like that better.
you know,
Yes, that's better.
you know, I mean, we're starting with the Arizona Coyotes because they've been the talk of the league, and just the fact of how they looked. And to me, it all boils down to one player. You know, Mike Smith. Mike Smith has looked good, and so when he looks good, then the team can play a Dave Tippett defensive style. And the surprise for me has been, you know, they've had offensive chances like the Tampa Bay Lightning, and not all Max Domi either. I mean, they have been better offensively in these two games than I anticipated. And you know, the Sharks, I had done a piece just before the start of the season where I talked about teams that I think are a lot better than people think. And in the preseason, even though I'm not a big preseason guy, and sort of evaluating that team and seeing when they're at and sort of figuring in the impact that Martin was going to have. And it's interesting, like when you look at the numbers, like Martin is not playing like 23 or 24 minutes. I think he's averaged 20 minutes. But, you know, he's just come in and sort of been a stabilizing bar for that defense. So, you know, I think those are the two teams that I find the most interesting that have played on the positive. And then on the downside, boy, are the Kings any good anymore? You know, you got to wonder that a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I've just seen bits and pieces, but they just don't seem like the same team. They don't have the same chemistry. They don't seem to have the same, you know, zest. And you know, it's way too early to get too carried away. But you know, after 10 games, if they were 3-7, then should we, you know, be concerned? It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I have to tip my chapeau to Mr. Cohen because the team that he picked for 8th place in the Atlantic is really having their problems right now. Not only with, you know, Chara being injured, now he's supposed to come back today against Tampa, but Patrice Bergeron took a low hit from Alexei Emelin and he was hobbled. Brad Marchand has suffered a concussion against Montreal. He's out indefinitely. They looked disorganized against Winnipeg. They've already waived Matt Irwin. I mean, that team, the Bruins, are really in trouble right now. I still don't think they're going to be worse than the division or worse than the conference, but right now, out of the gate, it looks troublesome in Boston.
I mean, to me, they're a mess. Like, when things are a mess in Boston, like I've seen it happen with the Red Sox. When things are bad, they get really bad really fast. And I don't think fans are ready for it, but I think it's happening. And I can't give you any more reasons than you just gave. But, you know, I'll tell you, Pittsburgh's shocking the fact that there's 2 games and they have 1 goal. I mean, that we knew they would give up a lot of goals, but the fact that they have only 1 goal is just mind-blowing. The fact that I counted 9 teams have 0 points. It's so easy to get a point in the NHL. I mean, even the Leafs have a point. Might have taken them 3 games, you know, but they have a point. Not like they don't have any points. I mean, that's kind of crazy. The Flyers having very little defense, not surprising. But the fact that they have only 3 goals, surprising. So that's another thing that you just kind of say, you know, there definitely are some bizarre things happening. As far as the Kings, I'll tell you this. We just had Mark Yannetti on our XM show the other day, and he's the director of scouting for them, and they still have a few players percolating in the minors that could come up this season if they want to. They hold fast to letting those guys get as much time as they can down there. Again, go look at most of the time it's 2 years. They have guys that are like right at that 2-year mark, getting close and just a little over. Wouldn't shock me if at some point they do go that way and bring them up. And they have some impact guys. And so they may have to do that. But again, they never start off. They always start off slow. So they'll probably wait 10 or so, 15 games. But the NHL is such this year with the parity, you really can't wait more than 10 games.
Right?
Yeah. Well, you don't want to overreact to,
No.
2 or 3 games. But on the other hand, good starts are so imperative that, and we've all, discussed how if you're not, in a playoff spot early, you're in trouble. So, that's why we do talk about these good starts. The other observation I would make is, and I thought about this the other day, because there's always the debate, is the West better than the East and so forth. And I think a lot of people believe that last year it sort of came around. But here's where I see the difference now, and I thought about this the other day as I was leafing through and watching games. It's the quality of goaltending in the East that has really allowed that. Like, there are no breaks. I was thinking about this the other day. You go from Lundqvist, you got to deal with Bishop, and now the Red Wings have a mentally tough goalie in Mrazek, and Howard has lost weight, and Luongo is tough in Florida. Since he's come over, his save percentage is right there among the leaders. Tuukka Rask is a great goalie. Fleury has gotten like, there are no breaks in that. And I think in the West that's not necessarily true. Obviously Pekka Rinne is a great goalie, but even though Crawford has 2 Stanley Cups, he doesn't have an aura. Quick, I think, is still a quality goalie, but the advanced stats suggest sometimes he's not. And there are goalies that Ryan Miller is an older goalie. We don't seem to believe in the goalies in St. Louis. Even though I seem to like him. Okay, so my point is I think that's what's allowed the East to really catch up, and why it's hard to win in the East is because you're facing just an exceptional goalie, every night.
I think that's true, and I had said earlier that I thought the Metro Division was the best division for goalies in hockey.
Yeah, I got one thing to add too. It almost doesn't matter now in the NHL if you have a high-powered offense, because if your defense stinks, it almost doesn't matter who's in net anymore, and it pretty much compromises the whole game because everything's predicated on defense. It just seems that way to me.
That's a good point. It really is, and it furthers my point, which I think is, which I've been making a bunch of times, so I'm going to make it one more time because I don't think I've been able to tell Kevin it yet. Is this point? And I wanted Kevin's opinion on this. I believe that defensive-minded forwards are dying. I think that we're seeing some teams that are bad defensively, mainly because their forwards are bad defensively, and that the whole thing of before, we had Troy Murrays and Bob Gainey's of the world and players like this that completely would always come in there and be. That's going away. Who is the defensive forward on the Pittsburgh Penguins or the Philadelphia Flyers?
Yeah.
Who are
Actually,
these guys?
I know who it was. It was Brandon Sutter.
Right, it was Brandon Sutter, and they traded him without any thought.
I think that's true. That specialist role as a defensive forward. Now you gotta produce, because it's so hard to get goals now. That it's just like we were talking at the last show I was on about Kevin Fiala and how David Poyle said they wanted him to make the team because they wanted to get some more offense out of that third line. And I talked in an earlier show about, why don't they just go to make that fourth line a scoring line? Well, I think we're seeing a lot of that. Everyone's trying to get some scoring out of that bottom, and when you do that, you don't have the guys that are just, dedicated to, being defensive specialists. I'm buying that. What you're saying.
It's a dying breed. I think the Predators are actually very good defensively from the forwards, and I think that goes beyond the fact that they have great defense and great goaltending. They actually have two-way players. Like Mike Fisher's a great two-way player, and there aren't that many of these guys. Mike?
Well, I'll even give you one more example, then I'll let you go, Mike. Sorry. It looks like the Flyers are set up to use 7 defensemen tonight. 3rd game into the season. What does that tell you?
I want to throw one thing out there, and Mike, you go first. Sorry, but now I'm going to throw this out there.
No, I was going to say three teams that I think, and again, it's a small window here, so it's 2 games, 3 games at the most. And Russ and I commented on this during the weekend. The Columbus Blue Jackets are in trouble if their defense doesn't play any better than they've played in the first couple games.
Right.
We know that Jack Johnson's a good offensive defenseman. They believe in David Savard because they signed him to the long-term extension, but there's not much after that and Ryan Murray. And really, they've I think allowed 9 goals in 2 games. They can't depend so much on Sergei Bobrovsky to carry the load. Otherwise, they're not going to get in that final 8. The other 2 teams. And these teams were not intended or not expected to, contend for a playoff spot. But a team as thin as Carolina, losing James Wisniewski to an ACL injury for 6 months, if you thought that their decision-making process on Eric Stahl may get accelerated because they're not going to be good. I mean, now it's Justin Falk and John Michael Lyles and Noah Hannafin if they decide to keep them up.
True.
And they lose almost an all-star quality defenseman. And the Buffalo Sabres are in a panic right now because they lost their number 1 goaltender who, had injury problems beforehand. Now their starting goaltenders is either Chad Johnson or Nathan Lewin or maybe Linus Ullmark. And they may have to go into the market and trade for a Jonas Hiller or somebody out there. But right now,
can you imagine that, trading for Jonas Hiller?
I'll tell you what, if they still have Makarov, I would bring him up.
I would too, absolutely.
I don't understand why he doesn't get a shot. He's a mature guy.
Yeah, right.
He hasn't even mentioned.
I'll tell you the player that might be perfect for them, though, and this is the perfect trade for both teams, Mike Smith. They've got cap space. Smith goes in there. He's a veteran goalie. He plays really well with teams that are kind of iffy defensively. And the Coyotes don't want Mike Smith to put them on a bubble. I mean,
well,
they have to win
Wait a minute. I bought what you're saying. I'm not buying this at all. Well, why would the Coyotes trade Mike Smith?
We're following patterns from last year. What the Sabres did when they traded away every goalie that won games for them. I mean, the Coyotes.
Remember now they've committed to fans that they're not rebuilding.
Right.
They've said publicly we are not rebuilding.
True. Good point.
So
that's publicly. Again, that's a good point. I do agree. And
I actually think a better fit for Buffalo would be a guy like Ben Scrivens because Edmonton would be very anxious to get rid of the cap hit because he's down in Bakersfield right now.
Not there yet. He can't play. He doesn't even figure out his visa. But yeah, he's going to be there eventually.
Well, that's the Keaton. Scrivens doesn't have a problem.
But
yeah, I mean he's making $2.3 million and that's on Edmonton's cap. They're not going to use him. It's going to be Nielsen. It's going to be Talbot. So that might make sense for Buffalo in a stopgap situation. He's only got 1 year left in his contract, so they're not marrying themselves to a long-term deal. It might be a decent fit, and he's a Cornell grad. He's aware of Western New York, so
true.
It might be a fit.
Hey, I did want to bring up because this has come up, and a couple of my readers have sent me emails, and it bears repeating. Even though and maybe Russ could speak to this. Hopefully, I have the information correct, but this is my understanding of it anyway. We talk a lot about the fact that you can go as low as 4th now if you have the worst team because you basically have a lottery for the first 3 picks. But what hasn't changed, if I understand this correctly, and correct me, Russ, if I'm wrong on this, that the odds of winning the Austin Matthews sweepstakes on the first draw are the same. It's still 20%. It's still.
It's still 20%, but more teams have a shot at it. That's the way.
Right, but I'm saying the team that's the worst team in the league still has a 1 in 5 chance of getting the. I mean, which is the same as last year, right?
Right, but they're not.
But last year, but they made a change just in the sense that more teams have a chance. It just might be like a 2.6% chance.
Right, and you can, last year you could only go as low as 2, obviously. Right. And now you can go to 4. But I'm just saying I keep reading and hearing people saying, well, you don't even have the same chance as you did last year. Well, that's not really true.
No,
you do have the same chance of getting the number 1 pick. It's exactly the same.
Yeah, no, odds-wise, you're correct. But and like you just said, what happens is if you're the Buffalo Sabres, you're not automatically guaranteed that number 2 slot.
Correct.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the draft for next year, I mean, say for example, it's going to be Austin Matthews, Jacob Chikrin, and Matthew Tkachuk. You could finish 30th overall and miss out on all 3. So.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely understand that, but I'm just saying, it isn't accurate to say,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you suddenly got a 1 in 20 chance of getting
Right.
Matthews. It's still the same on that first pick.
And so far, what good has Eichel and McDavid done anyway? Come on now, let's think about it.
Well, Larkin has been better than both of them.
Way better.
Oscar Lindbergh's been better than everybody.
So yeah.
Well, Lindbergh's been great. I wanted to touch on a couple things real quick. First of all, the Sharks. I'm just throwing it out there again. They were my pick to win this division, Kevin. You weren't here for that day, but I did pick the Sharks to win the Pacific, and because I love their moves, and now they've beaten the 2 teams in California. I think we can at least say the Sharks have made California interesting again. The Sharks are. I think the 3 teams in California are going to all be interesting. Can we at least add that?
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you. I'm bullish on the Sharks.
I'm not bullish on them, but they're interesting.
Yeah.
All right, now a big slight, like one of the biggest slights, and really the kind of slight that just doesn't go unnoticed in the NHL among players. Okay, so the Flyers go into Tampa Bay to play their opening game, correct? And they go down there and they scratch Vinny Lecavalier. Okay, they scratch him. That flat out, right? And now Vinny has gone on the offseason, gone and worked really hard to get himself back in shape. He came into camp, had a really good preseason, scored some goals, had some assists, really helped the second power play unit along. And then, so you have Lecavalier and you have Umberger. We've got 2 players that are essentially the same for the Flyers in that they're both, one you can't trade because of a big contract, one you can't trade because he's got a pretty big contract and he doesn't have much left in the tank in Umberger, right? Lecavalier has a little more left. If Lecavier's contract was $2 or $3 million, you could trade him. So he's in that situation, right? So there he is. You go into Tampa, okay, on a home opener in Tampa, which of course is Vinny Lecavalier's domain, right? That is where he comes from, and you play Umberger over Lecavalier. I had a couple players text me like, "What the heck was that about?" Just why are they doing that? Why would they put him on the bench instead of Umberger? In that situation, because they really are the same player. Kevin, thoughts?
Yeah, let me take that a step further too. This is a city where Subban got a lot of credit, rightfully so, for donating all the money.
Right.
Cavalier did that several years ago.
Right.
And donated millions and millions of dollars to building or to the Children's Hospital there. I think it was Children's Hospital.
Yeah, right. It was, and it's one thing to work all summer and get scratched for the opening game. Work really hard and improve yourself in camp and get scratched for the opening game. It's another if that's in a place like Tampa means to Vinny. I can't. And Lecavier's been professional about it completely. He hasn't done it as he always is. He has not saying anything about it. But when you're looking at, Vinny's got a lot of friends, in high places around the league. He's one of these popular players and that people talk to, and it's just one of those things that I was amazed at how many people were saying, "What are the Flyers doing?" And the only thing I can come back with is they're trying to piss him off. That they're trying. That
I think it's a new coach, and the new coach has. Here's the thing. There's nothing that Dave Haxtell has to do to make up to Vinny Lecavalier. He's a new player to him like everybody else.
But tell me there's that big
being
enough.
a nice guy.
Yeah, how about the big enough difference between?
Nice guys finish last, Kevin.
What is the Umberger versus Lecavalier difference, Russ? If I have a choice of one or the other, I'm going with Vinny.
All right, but here's the thing, though. I think they saw the difference in Game 1 where he had a couple of points, but now he's not even skating Umberger and not in the lineup tonight. And so now if Lecavalier doesn't get in tonight, which he may not, then that may be because of 7 defensemen, because Gagne will get in. And then it's just because, to me, it's because the coach doesn't see a useful player in him. That's what it tells me.
Yeah, but let's boil this argument down to what it really is. Yeah. We're talking about the last player in your lineup.
Yeah.
Who's not going to play a lot.
I know.
It doesn't really matter. And he's got a chance here to be a nice guy and play a guy who is very popular with a lot of people. in Tampa Bay who will have many, many friends at this game, and it doesn't cost him anything.
No.
Like, he's not playing him ahead of Giroux. He's playing him ahead against Umberger. So he had a chance just to be a nice guy, and because in the old days that would have happened.
Yeah,
for sure.
But coaches are different now, Kev, aren't they? We're seeing
that's the point. They are
the
different.
conspiracy theorists, of course. Let's throw that out there. Conspiracy bell. Wrong. Umberger is Hextall's pickup. LeCavier is not. All right. Hackstall comes in. Okay, and that's all the emails I've gotten. Like, okay, of course they're gonna, and I've gotten a lot of emails also saying this, and I don't really buy this 100%, but watching the Flyers broadcast, they have been very, very high on pushing how well Umberger's playing. They've been all over that. Have you seen this, Russ?
Yeah, I have seen that. But again, I'll counter with, what if neither are in the lineup tonight? Clearly, Umberger's not, and it seems like half the people you talk to says Vinny's not, and half the people you talk to say he is. What if they're both out tonight? Then what does that do for your conspiracy theory?
Yeah, no, but it does for my conspiracy theory. If they wanted to piss off Vinny and get him to accept to waive a no-trade clause, scratching him against Tampa in the first game of the regular season is a good way to do it.
Vinny won't do it. Vinny won't do that anyhow.
I know, but that's what it feels, and they should know that he's not going to do that because he's not. He's told them they're not. But it's just a class individual and a classless thing for an organization to do.
Heck, you know that buyout is gonna happen at the end of this year. If you look at LeCavier's contract, it was a front-loaded deal. He's making $3 million the last 2 years of his deal. If he gets bought out, it's $1 million a year spread over for 4 years. If they want to get rid of him now, then maybe you're right. Maybe they try to piss him off, alienate him. I think it's the wrong way to go. You're telling me that you can't play him instead of playing Belmar or Chris Vandevelde? I mean, I think it's an insult.
No, it's a real and big insult.
But with all the goals, I'm just going to play devil's advocate. With all the goals they gave up against Florida, they can't afford to do that in front of their home crowd and still expect people to show up to games. So it seems like they might play 7 defensemen, and then you've got Sam Gagner sitting there. So now, if I'm a new coach, I've got to try Sam Gagner before I worry about Vinny.
My only argument was about Game 1 in Tampa.
Yeah, that's what I'm mainly talking about too.
If not playing Vinny LeCavier, that's Hackstall's right now.
Yeah, right. I totally agree.
You gotta put his lineup. I'm just saying, why not throw the guy in Tampa? It costs you nothing. It's not that big of a deal.
It's a little bit of a reward to show you worked hard.
I agree with that. I do agree with that.
I just don't think that that's something that Flyers would have done in the past, and it just kind of stuck out. Like I said to people going to that game, is you think Vinny will be in the lineup? I'm like, he's got to be in the lineup. I'm playing in Tampa Bay. They're not gonna scratch me after all this, and in Tampa Bay. And sure enough, they scratched him. So
I think all this proves is that fans and some of the media still are expecting the Flyers to act like they used to act, and they're not. Under Ron Hextall, they're different.
Yeah, they're very different, but and we won't get any further than this. I don't want to waste all the time on the Flyers, but I will argue this, that I know that there's a little bit of we're Methodist and they were Catholic going on here with the Flyers. There's a little bit too much of trying to be different. Like, we're not going to sing from the balcony because that's what the Catholics do. There's a little bit, I get that they want to be different, but I'm just saying that there's a little bit too much interest in being different. And this is a case that's this is a class thing. Like, if Peter Luca was still in the organization, this would not have happened. There's certain things that there was a checks and balance in the Flyers organization that would keep something like that from going unnoticed. I believe it's Hackstall's right. And if Vinny showed up in camp and was unproductive and played horribly, I would have had no problem with it. But he was better than Umberger in camp, and here he is scratched in Tampa. That was my whole point. For what it's worth, I know the Flyers won't love me for this, but I'm just throwing it out there. The Preds. I want to talk about the Predators too, Kev, because they're right back to where they were in my mind. I mean, they've played 2 games, they've scored 4 goals and given up 1 in 2 games.
Yeah, and that's how they're going to win. That's how they're going to be successful. That's how they're going to contend, for the title. And just as we talked beforehand, you win it. I mean, everyone's forgotten this now, but the Blackhawks were middle of the road as a scoring team last season, but they were second defensively.
Yeah.
And they won the Stanley Cup. Well, the Predators are still going to, not be among the top scoring teams in the league, and they're going to have they have the best defensive core, and they have a great goalie. So, 4-1 over 2 games, spread that out over 82. That's where we're going.
Yeah.
So
that's about it. I mean, and they seem like right back where they were. Um, the Jets are a little bit surprising. Obviously, 2-0. They've had they played Boston.
They played
Boston is.
New Jersey.
Go ahead, Mike.
They played Boston and New Jersey, so I think the schedule.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
yeah, but they scored a lot of goals. I mean, I think
They did.
that's been impressive. And to me, what I saw out of that is the Jets saying, "Hey, look, we're in this. Don't discount us. That's a tough division, but we're a good team too. We got a top line, and for me, it just for them comes down to goaltending and defense. Like they have a real solid competitive team, and Maurice is a good coach, but with their goaltending and defense, allow them to stay in that tough central race, because boy, that is going to be just a dogfight.
Yeah, and it's bonus when you get points when you're playing in other teams' home openers. I always felt that way. Like when you're playing, with New Jersey and Boston. I mean, they're tough teams, but it's still the home opener. There's still like some excitement there. There's still something. Okay, that team's going for it. Like the Flyers definitely faced Florida in their home opener. You could see that was going on. But the Panthers were very good, and Mason was very bad. And Mason is not playing tonight, by the way, for personal issues. Which I think affected him this weekend too, but I won't get into it any further. But so tonight Neuwirth will be in goal for the Flyers when they open up.
Neuwirth hasn't been successful behind that defense either. I think it's the defense. I would never blame the goaltending for the Flyers. Even if Mason doesn't replicate his year, I can't blame him. That defense is awful right now. Yeah,
Neuwirth is I swear he's Nitamaki just in a different costume. Like he plays exactly the same style. He looks. It's very funny, but I think he's going to be all right. He definitely has a little bit of Bobrovsky disease that Bobrovsky had in Philadelphia of setting too early on shots, and so players are figuring out that if you wait for him to go down or if you skate with the puck a little bit further before you shoot, he might have set himself. You may have some net to shoot up, but he's very quick. He's got quick reflexes.
I got a couple other small things.
Let's go.
The Dan Boyle situation in New York's brewing because, look, he came into camp looking really old. We knew it. Everybody knew it. Now there's the talk, well, maybe they'll try and slip in McElrath Tuesday and not play Boyle. And so there's a lot of talk with that. Oscar Lindbergh with 4 goals, like nobody would have predicted that. And he won't keep up the pace, obviously, but it does prove that, like, people like me last year thought, hey, he could have been used a little bit more and maybe they could have gotten something else out of the lineup instead of riding St. Louis to the very end and everything else. So that sort of has helped the Rangers. Dylan Larkin has definitely helped the Red Wings. I mean, 3 points in 2 games. That's been huge for him. I mean, and who would? I mean, Connor McDavid doesn't have a point yet, right? I mean, but he's it's not his fault. That is the hard thing about being the first overall pick is when you're picked by a bad team and you're playing in the NHL as a young player. Even if you might be the next great player, it's still hard to get on the scoreboard.
And when you're playing, go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I saw him live in his first game, and I found it fascinating to me that there was a lot of it was almost like they were doing restaurant reviews on him, just the way he played. Afterward the discussion of, well, what would you rate him? Here's what I saw, because that's the first time I had seen him live. I obviously seen a lot of Jack Eichel, but I'd never seen Connor McDavid live. And I thought every shift he was on the ice, there was always a sense that he could break through, break free at any moment. And one play late in the third period, he blew by Jay Boomeister and turned Pietrangelo around. And when I watched that, I thought, this kid's just going to be fantastic. So I just think it's just a matter of being patient and waiting, and he's trying to figure it out. The only thing that I would say too is that, boy, what a difference it is for Connor McDavid to be a star in Canada and Jack Eichel to be a star in Buffalo. And Jack Eichel doesn't face any measure of media pressure that comes even remotely close to what Connor McDavid is. Like, you don't get near Connor McDavid. He's being sequestered there. You don't get near his dressing stall. He'll do 15 minutes. He'll be out in the the corridor. We got to make sure we have a backdrop, and so 25 people crowded around. As Seinfeld would say, a low talker. He's a very low talker, So, and meanwhile, Jack Eichel can be very relaxed. When I was in Buffalo in the preseason, I had a chance to chat with him one-on-one. I don't know that I'll ever get a chance to talk to Connor McDavid one-on-one, in Canada. So,
I heard the description that McDavid's challenge was not his own play, but was the players playing with him, adjusting to how they have to play to be with him, to be more effective with him. Now, that could be a symptom of playing more shifts with a guy like Laurie Korpikoski than playing with Taylor Hall. I don't get what.
That's the other part. I don't get that either.
It's like to accentuate the positives of an awe-inspiring offensive talent like McDavid, you play him with your top guys. You play him with Taylor Hall. You play him with Yakupov. You don't play him with third-line guys. I understand about paying your dues, and maybe that's what Todd McClellan is doing, but I'm sorry. You put an offensive guy with offensive weapons, and so far they haven't really done that.
It would be fascinating to see what it would have been like if he had ended up with a half-decent team and how they would have played him differently,
Oh, he'd be a top-line guy. It wouldn't even be a question.
Well, he'll be a top-line guy, right?
That's the difference. This is the point I was going to make about Dylan Larkin, and to add a scary factor to Dylan Larkin. I've seen both of their games. I saw one live and one on television. And in the first game, he started on the top line with Abdicator and Zetterberg. And he was a dominant player. And he was among their best players. Not playing well for a rookie, not being thing, but among the Red Wings' best players. In game 2, they had trouble. They weren't playing well. So Blashill changed the lines, put him. Now, they had been a one-line team in that first game. It was all the top line doing all the scoring. He changed them up, and he took Larkin off the top line and put Nyquist on that line, and then put him with Tatar as the center. Now, suddenly that line got going.
Yeah.
And, he's +6. He's been involved in all of their goals. This guy has been a catalyst, and I said 2 months ago that he was the best first-round pick since Yzerman, and I think he's the most exciting first-round pick since Yzerman. And I think I'm not going to say he's going to be Yzerman, but he's going to be a #1 center in this league, and he's going to be able to do it all. He is a very exciting player.
Yeah,
his first in the World Juniors. He was the most dominant guy for the U.S. team, but wasn't in the right role.
Right.
He really could have had more points than what he had.
It was frustrating to watch how they played him in that game, in that series. And we were forgetting to mention Justin Abdicator, who is the first star of the week by the NHL right now. Who puts in 4 goals too. I mean, that's nothing.
Thanks to Jonathan Bernier.
Well,
and let's not forget that he's a factor in the World Cup roster.
Yeah.
He's not a lock by any stretch, but he's in the conversation to play on that 4th line.
Yep.
Really interesting. All right, finally, I want to go to my story today, which is super college free agent to be Jimmy Vesey, who I've been doing a little research on the past few days, because Jimmy Vesey's father was hired by the Toronto Maple Leafs as a scout. Okay, and this completely, of course, is the conspiracy bell rings.
It's not only that, Eck.
Go ahead, Mike. Tell us what's going on, because I am not convinced he is not going to go to Nashville still.
Well, okay. Nobody can know for sure, but the circumstantial evidence when you have his dad being hired as a scout and his brother being drafted by the Leafs last year, and Lou Lamoriello's history of, mining and the NCAA for quality players, to me, it adds up to now. Even before the rumors of him, possibly going to Toronto started, the rumors were he was going to head the direction that Mike Riley had headed last year. You put that together with his dad getting hired by Toronto and his brother being drafted by Toronto. Circumstantial evidence is there. He's going to Toronto. I can't guarantee it. I can't. I'll bet you cookies on it, Eck. But I don't think.
Cookies.
I don't think he's going back to Nashville. I think he's going to test the market, and if we know that it's an entry-level deal no matter where he signs. But a team like Toronto would go the nth degree, meaning play him the last game of the season to burn a year of the entry-level deal, sign him to 2 years, let him go to arbitration or whatever they have to do to give him money early enough. That organization will pay for that. So I'm telling you, if I had to bet money on it, I would say that Jimmy Vesey is going to end up with the Toronto Maple Leafs next summer.
Kevin?
I could add to it. First thing is, Mike, if you really want to be convincing in a bet, don't bet cookies. You lose some points on that. It doesn't seem cookies is not a strong line to take. Everything else was.
That's what we've been betting before. So
I know. But I do believe in those things that Mike said, and I'll go one further. Mike Riley, he looked at what his chances in Minnesota were going to be for potential greatness, and he saw certain guys there and said, okay, I don't have a chance. Now, Vesey is probably looking at Nashville and saying, who am I going to be playing with offensively? This team can be an offensive killer for me. I want to be a really dynamic offensive player. I can look at these young kids in Toronto, and my agent's going to tell me, wouldn't you rather play with those guys than get stuck in Nashville? And so I think that's a big factor.
Kevin, thoughts?
I'm all in on my cookies. My Orioles are. I'm buying what Mike's selling. My Orioles are in. Like, I'm. You know, he didn't sign with Nashville last summer when they wanted him to sign, and everybody said, you know, he's going to test his free agency, and then when his dad gets hired, you know, and the brother, the connections, the evidence is just too strong. He's not going to suddenly sign with Arizona. You know, I think he's going to Toronto, and everything's equal. You know, if everything is equal, then, you know, why wouldn't you want to go where your dad is or your brother? And you know, they have the money and they have the opportunity. You can play right away. That's just the way it is.
I mean, he will walk in next year. I wouldn't put it past Mike Babcock, Brendan Shanahan to apply the full court press at the end of the year. You know, after the certain date when he's able to talk to other teams, and to essentially guarantee him, you know, not just a roster spot, but guarantee him a quality spot, because he's that type of player. If he wins the Hobey Baker, which, you know, he's one of the 2 or 3 favorites for, I wouldn't put it past the Leafs organization to do that. And that's, you know, with Marner, with Nylander, with whoever they draft in the first round next year, you will have that young core, and VC is, what, 22 years old?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it adds up. It really does.
A little bird me told you otherwise, but, you know, I'll listen. I'm not going to bet any cookies because I'm trying to lose weight, but I will definitely say that, you know, I mean, what you say makes sense. You know, the conspiracy theory, yes, indeed, makes sense. But we'll see. We'll see. I heard other things, you know, about you know, his experience in Nashville. I heard some good, some bad, but I also heard, you know, the Predators he was very pleased with the Predators, and really appreciative of the Predators when he made his decision to get his degree at Harvard, and they thought that was a great character thing. And Poyle's a character type guy.
Will Nashville burn that first year of the ELC? Probably not, but I know Toronto will.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe. Yeah.
No, they will.
They will, and I think the Preds could too, though. I mean, for a guy like this, the Preds, we know they need scoring. So
have the Preds ever done that? I can't recall the Preds ever doing that.
Yeah. If Toronto did it for Casey Bailey, and I'm not putting down Casey Bailey, but I'm just saying if they did it for a guy who a lot of people think he's a marginal prospect, they will do it for arguably the best college free agent out there this year.
I don't know. I'm going to fight the fight for Nashville here. Okay. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. Remember, guys, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk to you then.